that I wanted to cover for event one. We're now going to move over to analysis event two. This is why I had to do much more on the geopolitical side. So this was all about what happened with Poland drones. So our entire media was controlled and pushed out fear around we are never closer to World War III. So let's jump into analysis two, which I've called the Russia-Ukraine 19 drones over Poland is the story, and what the proof of weapons network is. And so, Azad, I'd like you to now play the second AI summary, which is on the Poland, Russia, Ukraine situation.
Okay, so you saw the headlines, right? Russia launches 19 drones into Poland, NATO ally under attack. And that immediate fear, Article 5 potentially being triggered, it felt like a major escalation.
It certainly looked that way on the surface, but there's this, well, really interesting analysis from Simon Dixon, the Bitcoin OG, that challenges that completely.
Right, Dixon. He's suggesting it's not what it seems.
Exactly. He frames these events less as, battlefield moments and more as strategic narrative management.
Narrative management. What does that mean in this context?
Well, according to Dixon, the aim is to keep Europe in a state of permanent fear. It helps maintain NATO cohesion, keeps everyone aligned.
And justifies something else you mentioned.
Yes, crucially, it justifies what he calls the endless profits of the proof of weapons network. It's about perception driving policy and spending.
The proof of weapons network. Okay, let's unpack that, because Dixon also argues this is why the Ukraine war just keeps going, right? No resolution in sight.
That's his core argument. He believes neither side, in a way, truly benefits from peace right now.
How so? For Russia?
For Russia, well, the longer it goes on, the more leverage they gain, arguably. Ukraine gets ground down, Russia consolidates territory, and it constantly reminds Europe who holds the cards on energy, for instance.
Okay, that makes a certain grim sense. But what about the other side? Who benefits from the stalemate there?
That's where this proof of weapons network comes in. Dixon sees it profiting enormously. It's this powerful trio.
Go on.
You have the military-industrial complex, the MIC, obviously feeding the weapons in. Then there's the technology intelligence complex, the TITAC, embedded in all of the surveillance and cyber aspects. And finally, the financial industrial complex, the FIC, which controls energy flows, sanctions, the actual financing of the war effort.
There's a whole ecosystem.
Precisely. And any talk of a peace plan, Dixon basically calls it theater. Why? Because a resolution would cut off the profit stream for this network, and Russia loses its leverage tool. The drama needs to continue.
So if this is the dynamic, what does it mean strategically, especially for Europe, caught in the middle?
Well, Dixon's view is stark. He says this isn't really about attrition between Russia and Ukraine anymore. That phase is kind of over. Ukraine is now a proxy battlefield.
A buffer zone, essentially.
An expendable buffer, yeah. Buying time. Time for Russia to slowly tighten its grip, its sort of incremental subjugation as Ukraine crumbles, and time for the POW network to push for incremental militarization across Europe.
And Europe itself.
Europe is positioned as the ultimate loser in his analysis, facing, higher energy costs, industry being hollowed out, migration issues, political division.
He mentions Nord Stream specifically, doesn't he?
He does. He sees that as a pivotal moment. It locked Europe out of cheap Russian gas and pivoted its dependence firmly towards U.S. LNG, U.S. weapons, U.S. financial terms. He points to Germany losing something like $100 billion in industrial capacity just from energy costs in 2022-23 alone.
Wow. Okay, so bringing it back to those drones over Poland, this is where Dixon's analysis gets really counterintuitive, maybe?
I think so, yeah. Because he looks at those incidents, whether they were accidental, maybe exaggerated, maybe even, manufactured, and calls them narrative weaponization.
Strategic stories, not just events.
Exactly. Stories designed to justify NATO needing this preemptive forward posture, to pull Europe deeper into that U.S. security dependence.
He calls it Article 5 theater.
Yes, invoking that collective defense idea keeps Europe under U.S. security management. And maybe it starts positioning Poland as the potential next proxy battleground if or as Ukraine continues to collapse.
So every incident, every missile, every headline
is another transaction, as Dixon puts it. Another data point justifying the proof of weapons network's existence and expansion. Resolution. That would kill the business model.
So looking ahead, what's the prediction based on this framework? It sounds pretty bleak.
It is. Dixon predicts Ukraine will, unfortunately, continue to crumble. Russia will consolidate its gains. The POW network, it keeps arming the proxy, whoever that might be next, until everyone's exhausted.
And the end game.
He suggests a deal eventually emerges. But it won't be about saving Ukraine. It'll be about partitioning Europe's spheres of influence. Ukraine likely gets absorbed, one way or another, by Russia.
And the POW network.
They accept that outcome, according to this view, in exchange for basically a permanent grip on Western Europe's security architecture and economy. Europe ends up, in his words, vassalized from both East and West.
That is a really stark thought. Diving into Dixon's analysis like this, it certainly makes you question the surface narratives, doesn't it? It forces you to look at the different interests possibly shaping how we even perceive these global events.
It definitely offers a different lens.
But I wonder, is there a risk in attributing too much power or coherence to a single network? Could reality be more complex, more chaotic even? Something to think about.
It is indeed something to think about because there are competing proof of weapons network, as I covered last week. And we can attribute too much power, but the destiny of the West, I do believe, is set. And I'll be covering more on what you can do if you live in the West as well and you're watching this. So anyway, let's go into the story. Now, I think right now this is rolling out in real time. As I took a little bit of a break, I think the headlines are saying that 40,000 troops are on the Polish border in order to combat Russian war games. And so the war machine is pumping up the media to petrify you into being comfortable with all the money that you're about to send if you live in the UK and Europe over to Ukraine, to the corrupt politicians that get their kickbacks as they send the money back over to the proof of weapons network to roll over the US debt-based Ponzi scheme and pump the US stock market that creates more wealth inequality in the K-shaped economy so that they can pump more inflation, make it harder for you to live if you don't own those shares, and force you into owning those shares, which is what perpetuates the network in the first place. And that's why we exit anyway, a little bit further than I wanted to go. So the story was that they're trying to scare the shit out of you. They're saying that 19 Russian drones went into Poland. Now, I'm not here to say whether that's real, whether that was Russia, whether that's false flag, whatever that is. I do not know. But I do know patterns, and I do know how we need to treat it, because the result is always the same, whatever the outcome is. We can speculate on how it's happening, but that's a distraction in itself from getting you prepared for what is about to happen. So after the 19 drones went into Poland, there were 30 to 40 cruise missiles that went into Ukraine. We had all the usual pandits that are paid for the military lobby. All the pandits, all of the Senate members, all of the Congress members, all of the European prostitutes, all of the quote unquote prime ministers, all of the agents that are just paid for that might as well sit in BlackRock's office at this stage, or Lockheed Martin and JP Morgan's office. And Republican Joe Wilson came out and said, oh, of course, this is Russian using Iran's drones. So they need to mix in some of the Iran part in there, even though Russia's creating its own drones. It was buying drones from Iran, but now it's built its own capabilities as well. But anyway, narrative management is ratcheting up right now, and that was the reason for these drones, however they appeared. And please don't think that they're not willing for Ukraine to send their own drones, or the Proof of Weapons Network to send their own drones, in coordination with the new Polish leadership that is obviously controlled by the European Union. And his job is to give an acceptable narrative to the Polish people, while the European Central Bank prints more money and sends it over to the military-industrial complex in America to pump up those share prices as well. But anyway, I personally don't believe this is escalation into World War III. I've covered this all the way through. That destiny was stopped because we had essentially the tariff policy to reset the world order, the installation of Trump, and a recognition that China had already won the trade war, which means that BlackRock putting more and more of its money into different types of ETFs, and we have all of these events in order to scare the shit out of you so that they can push the K-shaped economy and push up their profits as well. But it's lots and lots of positioning that Europe is in fear. They need you in complete fear. They need you, Polish people, petrified. They need you, Ukrainians, petrified. They need you, Brits, petrified. They need you, Germans. They need you, French. They need you completely petrolized and paralyzed by fear so that you say, I don't care that I'm homeless in a tent. I don't care that I'm turning to drugs to keep warm. I don't care that there is mass immigration and my society is moving to shit. We need to prevent the boogie monster, preventing them from coming in and creating war with us. And obviously, this is NATO expansion. This is NATO pushing out the narrative via USAID and other organizations, and the repackaged one that pays the BBC and the control media and all the different media assets that it controls, as well as all the pundits and useful idiots on social media that still want you to believe that this is about defending democracy. This is all about pushing US stock market, US GDP, US dominance, and propping up the dollar scheme at the expense of the people until you get to civil unrest where you can't prop it up anymore. Then you reset the world order, which has all been prepped for. So this is just proof of weapons network revenue and profits. They've got another $1 trillion that they can estimate that they can scam out of the people if they scare the shit out of you enough. So I've covered this previously, but I just want to do a bit of a recap on this operation and how I see it by following the money, and why I've always said every time everyone gets excited about peace deals, I've said this isn't going to lead to peace. They will not stop until they've got that $1 trillion of additional revenue, and then they'll somehow manage to move it to peace. And the reason that there is no resolution in this one is because it is actually a proxy war between the Russian proof of weapons network aligned with the Shanghai proof of weapons network that is carving out territory for the multipolar world order that we're transitioning to against the traditional vassalized Western proof of weapons network, which is the privatized, securitized, and financialized forces that are kind of asset managed via BlackRock, State Street, and Vanguard. And so the reason this won't stop is because the longer this goes on for, the more leverage Russia gains. Russia knows that all that America can do is print money, prop up the Ponzi scheme, and spend it to prop up the stock market. And they will continue to do that for as long as they need to do that. Lockheed Martin doesn't care about, the proof of weapons network, the military industrial complex doesn't care about America's national interest. They just care about replenishing weapons. They just care about making sure that sales go through so that they can maintain revenue and they can start to plan their next conflict zone that they're going to profit from. So, but the longer this goes on for, the more leverage Russia gains and the proof of weapons network gains. Whether it be land, whether it be energy, whether it be control, all of it is pointing towards no resolution to this conflict and a forever war model, a classic forever war model, but in Europe, coming into itself as a beta test for what they want to do in America and any neighbor of America as well. So this is just, for proof of weapons network profits. And all of these statements are designed to justify them. So basically, the model is the military industrial complex profit from weapons sales. Trump negotiates for Lockheed Martin by going to NATO. He creates a theater with Zelensky where the Americans start to think, oh, Trump wants peace. He's the guy of peace. That fails, and it makes it look like it's because of those crazy leftist, wokist, radicalized Europeans, and J.D. Vance pushes that narrative, while Europe says, all right, we got to come together and we got to persuade our people why we need to pay it. And so they need the Putin narrative in order to say, well, we need to protect our country. So whenever it gets to the point where everyone starts to get pissed off, they then ratchet up a new narrative to show, all right, no, another country, he wants to take over the whole of Europe, even though financially not possible at all. There is no way on earth that Russia can handle the largest country in the world as well as Europe. It would be financial suicide. And it's obvious, anybody that's done the numbers and the maths. There is inflation in Russia. They're down to 15% debt to GDP. The bonds are actually going up. Interest rates are really high, but they've got their alliance with BRICS that is allowing them to continue this on for a lot longer than Ukraine, which is fully ingrained in IMF debt, the UK guaranteeing part of the sanction money, financial weapons of mass destruction, the wheat being used as collateral, the largest resource. America's siphoning out all of the rare earth minerals for Elon Musk batteries and other parts of the technical industrial complex and Tim Cook's laptops and everything that's needed there, and the electric vehicles. The technical industrial complex are benefiting because they're selling all these surveillance contracts. Palantir gets to test its new artificial intelligence technology. It gets to integrate it with those drones. And those drones are now being beta tested within America and integrated into AI. And of course, the financial industrial complex gets to manage and manipulate bond markets. And the more assets they can end up with at the end, the better for those regions. So peace is complete theater. And I told that to everybody when Putin went to visit Trump and everyone was getting excited saying Trump's going to cause peace. I said, sorry, the numbers don't match up. There's no way this is going to be peace. And so you get a failed peace plan. And then you get the rhetoric coming out of Trump, who's an actor from his days in, what was that show that he was involved in? Anyway, put it in the comment section to remind me. But he gets to act and say, yeah, I'm very upset with Putin, goes back and forth with all of this trade war theater with Modi and everything we're seeing as well. So the statements is the strategy. You will hear the narrative. You will see the 40K troops deployed. And all of that is just to justify why more and more money needs to be austerity on the people over to propping up the dollar debt-based Ponzi scheme through the euro-dollar market. So Russia, from my perspective, as long as the proof of weapons network wants to continue this farce and there is $1 trillion of revenue to be made, Russia will end up vassalizing the whole thing, in my calculation. As sad as that is, Zelensky, who was installed, was there in order to perpetuate these profits and this corruption to the last Ukrainian. And this is not going to end well, but they just need you to believe in the narrative for as long as possible. So it's going to be incremental. It's going to be, the longer this goes on for, the better. You've got obviously the sideline effects on the US debt-based Ponzi scheme, and you've got the Russian inflation challenges, but they'll carry on. And NATO expansion is the game. And what does it actually mean? What's the real mission? Well, the mission was to fully vassalize and destroy Europe, as I've always covered. They knew that this was an energy shock, and that energy shock would kill the German manufacturing base. And that's why Merz came in. That's why Macron is in France. That's why Starmer is in UK. The people don't vote for these people. They are not elected. They are selected through lobby power. And that leads to industries collapsing. We got negative growth coming in the UK, 4% inflation. The economy has no vision, no strategy. And Larry Fink comes over with Sam Altman in order to build how to turn the UK into an artificial intelligence data center. So BlackRock accumulates and starts to try and secure Thames Water to reallocate the water there so that they can send you a shitcoin and a token like they're trying to do in Gaza, so that you can compete with BlackRock and AI data centers on whether you get your water or not. This is why the importance of escaping the network and understand and planning for this is important. Now, how do they get there? They scare the shit out of you because they create their migration crisis. Rhetoric is put out there. They manufacture violence. And this is essentially a political fracture so that the whole political process can fall down, and then the pre-crime solution that we've talked about, the technical industrial complex is trying to do, it gets implemented and they get to acquire more and more assets in distress. Who's competing? The Gulf is competing. So the Gulf is competing with the proof of weapons network. The sovereign wealth funds are accumulating more assets across Europe. Is giving them more ability, for the Middle East to say, we are the new Europe. And they get to acquire more and more assets, which gives them the types of control to resolve the Palestinian cause, as we covered in part 1, by acquiring more influence and acquiring more assets. And the more people get upset by that, the more escalation, the more civil unrest we're seeing. And that is completely boiling over right now. So this was just Poland escalating in order to drive more narrative so that they can justify more weaponization and more NATO for fear and theater, which will lead to more money being sent over. More money printing will come as a result of that. More big, beautiful bills, more budget needed across Europe. And of course, Article 5 is the fearmonger, because they say, as per Article 5, an attack on any NATO country means that we all have to join. You get a spectacle, you get fear across Europe, you get narrative that we're moving into World War III, and you get complete complicity with the proof of weapons network in order to do that. Now, there may actually be a genuine escalation. The POW may decide to go from Ukraine to Poland, but it definitely won't be because Russia wants to take over Poland, because that would be an absolute economic crisis. Maybe that's the plan. I don't see any indication of that right now. But Poland is just going to be the next playground. And they were the recipient of the most amount of Ukrainian refugees. And they're going through the immigration types of, populism and everything that they're receiving right now. So anyway, this is the European trap. This is why Nord Stream pipeline came down. This is why the nuclear power plants in Germany were switched off. This is why you had these constant snap elections across the, and coalition governments and all of these different things. Russia holds the energy leverage. The only way for Europe to solve its problem is to stop buying its expensive energy from America and buy it from Russia. Is the only way this gets solved, and then to actually become sovereign. But it is completely under the control of the US POW at this stage. So US is going to gain some GDP prints, roll over the debt-based Ponzi scheme, and Norway will end up with more profits in its sovereign wealth fund, which, because of its partnership with the Gulf countries, and has been de-investing from Israel, and has been deciding that it will be boycotting and taking out much of its investment in the largest sovereign wealth fund in the world that we covered, the $2 trillion one. So this is a complete trap for Europe. Overpriced energy was the weapon that they used, and vassalization is the end goal. I don't see a reversal of this one, sadly. The immigration stuff is the tool. It's red hot. I just don't see how anything changes from here. I only see civil unrest, and I only see the technical industrial complex putting in the solution. And this is a typical proof of weapons network transaction. Fire drones, manufacture fear, push NATO unity across the media networks, and get more military industrial complex tactics. Then you fire some sanctions, and the sanction leads to more surveillance state, technical industrial complex, more control, more panic. And then from that panic, you get to leverage up, borrow more. The bond markets have to pay a high yield in order to roll them over. And so more financial industrial complex leverage. And the UK is the largest lender, other than Japan, to the US stock market when we cover the macro side. And so they just become a tool for the US stock market. That's the outcome. Unfortunately, Ukraine is partitioned. I don't see any alternative that's going to come from this, and I don't see any type of different from that. Okay, I think I'm back. So yeah, essentially the history is that you had the fall of the Soviet Union, you had the fall of the Berlin Wall, an agreement that there was going to be a neutral zone between Russia and the proof of weapons network, the Russian ones and the US one. Then we had the NATO expansion. Then we had the resistance against that. We had the CIA operation. We had the coups in Ukraine. We had everything that was released on WikiLeaks for anyone that's been following it. Eventually you need that partition. And the only way that happens is by Russia having control of certain parts of Ukraine, and the US proof of weapons network deciding it's going to partner with Russia in a BRICS corridor so it can do what it's doing in Gaza, try and get strategic leverage in order to partner and build a new financial side, get the rare earth minerals and everything we're seeing right in front of us as well. So POW secures its grip on Europe, and Poland becomes the next phase of this transition to the multipolar world order. So that was analysis number 2. If that wasn't enough, I'm sorry we got so much to cover. We had the next operation, which